The forest was quiet. Only the sound of birds and the soft wind moving through the trees broke the silence. It was a peaceful place, until something strange tore through the sky. A silver light shot across the clouds like a falling star. But this was no star. It shook the sky, leaving a trail of fire behind. Deep in the forest, the light crashed, shaking the ground with a heavy boom. Nearby, Jacob Reeves looked up from the firewood he was chopping. He lived alone in a wooden cabin, far from any city. A former soldier, Jacob had seen many strange things during his time in space patrol, but this was different. He picked up his old binoculars and scanned the sky. "That wasn't a meteor," he muttered. Without wasting time, Jacob grabbed his backpack, always ready for anything. He filled it with medical supplies, a flashlight, and a few tools. Then he set off toward the crash site. Not far away, hidden in thick smoke and broken trees, a figure crawled from the wreckage. Her silver skin shimmered under the fading light. She was tall and slender, with glowing blue eyes and hair like fine threads of glass. Her name was Varelian, and she was not from Earth. Her ship had been hit by a hunter drone while escaping from a slave convoy in deep space. She had aimed for the closest habitable planet, this green and unknown place humans called Earth. Her body ached. One leg was injured and her chest hurt with every breath. But the worst pain came from something: simple hunger. Her species, the Serenians, were not used to eating the way humans did. They absorbed nutrients from light and liquids. But she had gone days without either. She didn't know much about humans, only rumors, primitive, emotional, unpredictable. But now, as her vision blurred, she realized that she needed help, even from a human. With great effort, Varelian pulled herself away from the crash and into the trees. Jacob found the crash site after an hour of hiking. The small spacecraft had carved a path through the trees like a giant blade. The ship was still warm, its hull cracked and smoking. He approached carefully, weapon ready, just in case. But there was no one inside. He scanned the area and noticed a faint trail of blood. Silver, not red. His eyes widened. "This isn't normal," he whispered. Following the trail, he moved quietly through the forest. Finally, he found her. She had collapsed near a stream, her body half covered in leaves. Jacob took a deep breath and stepped closer. "Hey, are you alive?" The figure stirred. Her eyes opened slowly. She stared at him, confused and afraid. "I'm not here to hurt you," Jacob said, kneeling beside her. "You're injured. Let me help." She didn't speak his language, but something in his calm voice made her nod. Jacob gently lifted her, surprised by how light she was. "All right, let's get you out of here." Back at his cabin, Jacob laid her on a soft blanket near the fireplace. He started by cleaning her wounds and wrapping her injured leg. She watched him closely, still unsure of what to think. After tending to her injuries, he went to the kitchen. "You need food," he said, though he knew she probably didn't understand. Still, he started cooking. It was something he was good at. In the army, his meals had kept spirits up. Now, they helped him feel normal. The smell of cooking filled the cabin: roasted vegetables, warm bread, and a light stew. Varelian's nose twitched. Her kind had never eaten for pleasure. They had never tasted flavor, but something inside her stirred. When Jacob placed the bowl in front of her, she hesitated. "It's safe," he said, taking a spoonful himself. Then he offered it again. She slowly dipped the spoon and tasted the soup, and everything changed. Her eyes widened. She blinked in shock. It was warm, rich, and full of textures she couldn't describe. Her whole body reacted. She took another bite, then another. Jacob watched her, a small smile on his face. "Guess that's a yes." Varelian didn't know the words, but she understood one thing: this man, this human, had saved her. Not just her body, but something deeper. The feeling of safety, of being seen, of kindness with no reason. That night, after she finished the meal, Jacob gave her a blanket and set up a bed on the couch. "You can stay here until you're better," he said. No one will find you here. She looked at him, then pointed to herself. Virelian, she said slowly. Jacob smiled. Virelian, that's your name? She nodded. Jacob, he said, tapping his chest. Cub, she repeated. They both smiled. No more words were needed that night. Outside, the forest was quiet again, but something new had begun. A bond, fragile but real, had formed between two beings from different worlds, and it had all started with a simple meal. Morning light crept through the trees and reached the small wooden cabin deep in the forest. Inside, Jacob was already up, boiling water for tea and preparing breakfast. He moved quietly so he wouldn't wake his guest. Virelian lay on the couch, wrapped in a thick blanket. Her breathing was calm. The night before, she had fallen asleep after finishing every last spoon of stew he gave her. Jacob still couldn't forget the way her eyes lit up after that first taste. He wasn't sure what to call her, alien, visitor, survivor. But he had learned one thing for sure. She wasn't dangerous. She was lost, hurt, and hungry for more than food. She needed safety, maybe even friendship. As he cooked, he heard movement. He turned to see her sitting up slowly, blinking at the morning light. Good morning, Jacob said, offering a gentle smile. Virelian tilted her head. She didn't understand the words, but she could feel his tone. Peaceful, kind. He handed her a warm piece of bread with honey. She accepted it slowly, taking a small bite, and smiled. Jacob laughed. Looks like you're getting used to earth food. Virelian tried to mimic his words. Gating, used, that's close, Jacob nodded. He tapped his chest again. Jacob, she nodded. Jacob, then she pointed to herself. Virelian. Jacob smiled. We'll figure it out, Virelian. Over the next few days, the forest became their quiet world. Jacob took care of Virelian's wounds, and in return she began to teach him her language, slowly, with hand gestures and small words. He learned that her people didn't speak with sound alone. They used patterns of light from their skin and subtle mental signals. Jacob couldn't understand all of it, but he listened carefully. She seemed touched by his patience. Virelian was curious about everything. She stared at his firewood stove like it was a miracle. She asked questions about birds, trees, and even spoons. Jacob answered her with simple words and gestures. Their conversations were slow but filled with laughter. One evening, she followed him outside and pointed to the stars. My home, she said softly, then drew a shape in the air with her fingers. Jacob watched her face, filled with longing. You miss your world? She nodded, then turned to him and pointed to the cabin. My now, she said. Jacob was quiet for a moment, then smiled. Well, your now is safe. She smiled back. One day, Jacob decided to show her how he cooked. He handed her a potato, then showed her how to cut it. Virelian was awkward at first, holding the knife like a surgical tool. No, like this, Jacob said, guiding her hand. She blushed, a light blue glow rising under her silver skin. They cooked together, laughing when she dropped a carrot or tried to taste salt by smelling it. For her, flavor was a discovery. For Jacob, watching her enjoy it was better than any meal. After dinner, she tried to help clean. She held a sponge and looked at it like it was a strange creature. That's not for eating, Jacob chuckled. She giggled, a soft musical sound. As the days passed, something began to grow between them. Not just understanding, but something deeper. Jacob had always been alone. After the war, after losing his family, he had come to the forest to forget. But now, each day felt brighter. Each moment with Virelian reminded him that the world was still full of wonder. Virelian, too, changed. When she first arrived, she was quiet, guarded, afraid. Now she smiled often. She walked without fear. She even tried drawing her world, for him using sticks and stones. But peace never lasts forever. One afternoon, while Jacob was chopping wood, he noticed something strange in the sky. 3 black dots, moving in perfect formation. He frowned. That's not normal. He ran inside and grabbed his old binoculars. Looking closely, his heart sank. They weren't birds. They were drones. Military type. Not human. Jacob rushed inside. Varelian, we have a problem. She looked up, sensing the change in his voice. He pointed to the sky, then to her shipwreck in the distance. Someone found it. Varelian's face turned pale. She stood, her eyes wide with fear. Hunters, she said. Jacob didn't need translation. He grabbed a duffel bag filled with supplies. We're leaving. Now. They ran through the forest, moving fast and quiet. Varelian knew how to avoid being tracked, and Jacob knew the land well. They traveled until sunset, finally reaching a small cave hidden behind a waterfall. Jacob had used it before during training missions. It was safe, for now. Inside, they sat by a small fire, catching their breath. They won't stop, Varelian said, her voice heavy. They want to take me back. Jacob shook his head. Not going to happen. She looked at him, eyes wide. Why? Why help me? Jacob looked into the fire. Because no one helped my family when they needed it. Because you're not the enemy, and because... He paused. You matter. Varelian's eyes softened. She reached out, gently touching his hand. Jacob. Human. Kind. He looked up. That's what we're supposed to be. They sat in silence, hand in hand. The fire cracked quietly. Outside, the wind carried the soft sound of birds. In that cave, in that quiet moment, they were no longer alien and human. They were two souls who had found each other in a wide, wild universe. And though danger still followed them, so did something new. Hope. The cave was quiet, but Jacob could not sleep. The fire had gone low, casting soft orange light on the walls. He looked across the small space. Varelian was resting, her face peaceful, though her sleep was not deep. She often woke suddenly, listening to sounds only she could hear. Jacob had lived alone for years, but now he shared every moment with someone from a world he once believed only existed in stories. And yet, she had become his closest friend. But tonight, something felt different. He stepped outside and looked up at the sky. The stars were clear, too clear. He used to find peace in their beauty, but now he looked for shapes that didn't belong. And then he saw it. A faint, dark outline, nearly invisible, moved across the stars. Not an airplane, not a bird. It was a ship, a hunter ship. They found us, he whispered. Jacob rushed back inside. Varelian, wake up, she sat up quickly. They're close? He nodded. We need to move again. Your signal. Maybe it's still active. Varelian frowned. I tried to shut it down, but if they track energy or scent or memories, Jacob was already packing supplies. Then they're smarter than we thought. They left the cave before the sun rose. Jacob led them through narrow forest paths, staying away from roads. He had a map in his mind, safe places he had marked over the years. They headed west toward the mountains. For 2 days they moved through the wilderness, traveling by night, resting during the day. Varelian's leg was better now, and she walked without pain, but Jacob could tell she was growing tired. On the third night, they found shelter in an old watchtower. The wooden steps creaked as they climbed to the top, but the view gave them a clear look across the valley. Jacob set down his backpack and sighed. We'll rest here, just for the night. Varelian sat beside him. Do you think they will find us again? Jacob looked at the stars. If they do, I want to be ready. Varelian was quiet for a while. Then she said, Jacob, I did not tell you everything. He turned to her. I'm not just a passenger. I was a daughter of the House of Tyrrell. My family ruled a peaceful sector of stars, but we were betrayed. My parents, they were taken. I escaped. Jacob listened without speaking. I have something they want, she continued. Not just me. Something else. She reached into her jacket and pulled out a small metal cube. It glowed faintly. This is called a Starmind key. It holds data, maps, knowledge from my world. It can unlock ancient paths through space. Jacob stared at the cube. Why didn't you tell me? Because anyone who helps me is in danger. I didn't want to put you in more. He smiled gently. A bit. Late for that now, don't you think? She smiled too, but her eyes were sad. Jacob, you are the first being who showed me kindness. In my world, meals are just energy. But that night, when you cooked for me, it changed something in me. I began to feel. Jacob looked at her, heart beating faster. I'm not special, Varelian. I just did what anyone should do. No, she said softly. Not everyone would help a stranger. You did. They fell asleep in the watchtower, but it did not last long. A sharp, loud buzz woke Jacob. He opened his eyes to flashing red light. Varelian, down. A laser shot tore through the wall just inches above them. Outside, a black ship hovered. 3 drone soldiers dropped from it, glowing eyes scanning the structure. They're here. Jacob grabbed his gear. We go now. Varelian grabbed the cube and jumped after him. They raced down the stairs as another shot hit the tower. Jacob turned and fired a flare gun into the trees. Bright light filled the area. The drones paused for a moment. Run! Jacob shouted. They sprinted into the forest, dodging trees and leaping over rocks. The drones followed, fast and silent. Jacob stopped behind a boulder. Keep going. I'll draw them off. Varelian grabbed his arm. No. We stay together. He hesitated, then nodded. All right. But we need a plan. She opened her jacket, again. The cube. It can overload their tech. But only if we get close. Jacob looked toward the sky. Then we go up. An hour later, they reached an old observatory deep in the forest. Jacob had helped build it years ago with a science team before it was abandoned. It still had a working tower and some leftover equipment. This is our stand, he said. We fight here. Varelian helped him set traps using alien tools and Jacob's old military tech. They powered up lights, activated barriers, and placed the cube in the center of the tower. When the drones came, they were ready. The fight was fast and bright. Lasers burned the ground, but traps exploded with stunning force. Jacob used smoke grenades to confuse their sensors, while Varelian used light signals to blind them. Then she activated the cube. A bright pulse spread out, knocking the drones back. Their systems sparked and failed. One fell, another tried to flee, but the signal followed it like a wave. All 3 collapsed, quiet and still. Jacob ran to Varelian. She was on her knees, breathing hard. You did it, he said. We did it, she replied, smiling weakly. Jacob helped her stand. They looked out at the fallen machines. Think they'll send more? He asked. Varelian nodded. Yes, but now we have time. He looked at her seriously. Then we need to do more than run. We need allies. She nodded. My people. Some may still be out there. If we send a message, maybe someone will answer. He smiled. Let's build something bigger, a way to reach them. She took his hand. Together? Together. As dawn rose, the observatory stood tall once again. But now, it was more than a building. It was a signal tower, a shelter, a beginning. Jacob and Varelian stood side by side, looking toward the sky. The stars were still far, but now the future didn't seem so distant. The observatory tower stood silent under the night sky, but inside Jacob and Varelian were busy preparing. The old building was no longer just a shelter. It was their stronghold. More drones will come, Jacob said, checking the weapons he had gathered. We have to be ready. Varelian nodded. Her glowing skin dimmed as she concentrated on activating the alien technology around them. The cube gave us power, but it is only a small part. We need to combine Earth and Serenian. Strength, Jacob smiled. Sounds like teamwork. They had no choice. The hunters were relentless, and the closer they came, the more dangerous the fight would be. Over the next days, they worked together with steady focus. Jacob contacted some old friends, fellow soldiers who owed him their lives. They came quietly, bringing tools, weapons, and supplies. Varelian showed them how to use the alien technology. It was strange and beautiful. Devices that could bend light, shields that shimmered in the air, and sensors that read hidden signals. The humans listened and learned quickly. The trust between Jacob and Varelian spread to the group. Late one night, as they gathered around a small fire, Varelian told her story. "My family ruled the Tyrol sector," she said softly. "We were peaceful, but enemies wanted our power. They captured my parents. I escaped with the Starmind key. The last hope for my people." Jacob listened, his face serious. "But if we lose it," Varelian continued, "the knowledge of my world could be lost forever." Jacob reached out, touching her hand gently. "Then we fight to keep it safe." She smiled faintly. The calm didn't last long. One afternoon, from the observatory's high window, Jacob spotted movement in the forest. Shadows darted between trees, hundreds of them. "They're coming," he said, his voice low but steady. Varelian looked around at the group. "Prepare yourselves." The hunters arrived like a storm. Dark ships hovered over the trees, dropping soldiers with heavy weapons. The ground shook with the sound of explosions. Jacob and Varelian stood side by side at the tower's entrance. "Hold the line," Jacob shouted. They fought fiercely. Jacob used his training to lead the defense, shouting orders and keeping the group together. Varelian's hands glowed as she activated shields and traps. The alien devices hummed with power, stopping many attackers before they could reach the tower. Despite the attackers' numbers, the defenders stood strong. But then, a loud crash came from behind. One hunter broke through the back wall, armed with a strange weapon that fired energy bolts. Jacob saw it coming. He grabbed a metal beam and swung, knocking the weapon aside just as the hunter aimed again. Varelian rushed forward using a blast of light from her palm to stun the enemy. Together they pushed the attackers back. After hours of battle, the hunters began to retreat. The defenders were tired but victorious. Jacob and Varelian stood in the ruins of the broken wall looking at each other. "We did it," Jacob said, breathing heavily. "For now," Varelian replied. "They will come again." Jacob took her hand. "Then we'll be ready. Together." The bond between them was no longer just friendship. It had grown deeper, built on trust and shared danger. That night, under the stars, they talked quietly. "Jacob," Varelian said, "when I first arrived, I did not know kindness, only fear." Jacob smiled. "You taught me a lot, too, about hope." She looked into his eyes. "Will you stay with me? Not just to fight, but always?" Jacob's heart raced. He nodded. "I will." In the days that followed, Jacob and Varelian prepared to send a message across space, calling for help from her people. They worked long hours combining human technology and Serenian knowledge. When the message finally went out, it was more than a call for aid. It was a promise that Earth was a place of courage and friendship, a place where two very different beings had come together to protect what mattered most. The quiet hum of the observatory filled the air as Jacob and Varelian stood before a glowing console. Their message had been sent, broadcast across the stars, reaching out to allies far beyond Earth. Jacob looked at Varelian. "Do you think they will come?" She smiled softly. "They will. The Serenians never forget their own." Outside, the forest was peaceful, but the quiet was only the calm before a new beginning. Days passed slowly. Jacob and Varelian kept watch, ready for any sign of help or danger. The bond between them grew stronger with each sunrise and sunset. One evening, as the sky turned pink and gold, a small ship appeared over the horizon. It moved with grace and speed, its shape unlike any human craft. Jacob's heart beat fast. "They're here." Varelian's eyes shone with hope and relief. The ship landed in a clearing near the observatory. From it stepped a group of beings, tall, elegant, their skin shimmering faintly like Varelian's. The leader approached, bowing slightly. "Princess Varelian," she said in perfect common speech, "we have come to protect you and to welcome you back home." Jacob stepped forward. "And I'm here with her. I will stand by her side." The leader nodded. "Your courage has reached us all. Earth is honored." The days that followed were filled with meetings and plans. Varelian's people had been watching Earth quietly for many years, waiting for a chance to connect peacefully. Now, thanks to her and Jacob, they had that chance. Jacob found himself standing before an interstellar council, a place where many species gathered to discuss the future. He spoke clearly and simply. Earth is a place of kindness, of hope. We don't need to be afraid of what is different. We can learn from each other. His words echoed through the hall. When he finished, there was silence. Then, one by one, beings from many worlds stood and applauded. Varelian smiled, proudly. In the weeks after, Earth was no longer alone in the universe. New friends arrived. Trade ships, scientists, explorers. They shared technology, stories, and culture. Varelian and Jacob worked together to build bridges between worlds. And then, on a clear night beneath the stars, a small ceremony was held. On a quiet moon station, surrounded by friends from many planets, Varelian and Jacob stood before a simple altar. They exchanged words, promises of love, trust, and partnership. When they joined their hands, the room filled with light, soft and warm. Two hearts from different stars, now beating as one. Jacob looked at Varelian after the ceremony. Who knew a single meal could change everything? She smiled. It was more than a meal. It was hope. Together they looked out at the stars, knowing that their journey had only just begun. Because in a universe so wide, kindness was the strongest force of all.